Like a garden snail leaves a trail behind, a story snail leaves a tail behind. Share our stories and you may find you can tell a story too.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another storytelling assembly. The month of January is a really exciting month, isn't it? Because it comes right at the start of the year. People are making plans for what they want to happen throughout the rest of the year. Sometimes they call those plans resolutions because they are determined to make sure that good things happen for the year ahead. But the month of January also has some very important days in it. I'm not just talking about New Year's Day. It's also the month where we find World Religion Day. That's a day that encourages people from all religions around the world to really think about how they could work together to make the world a better place. And while we're on the subject of making the world a better place, it's also the month of a very special birthday. The birthday of a man who did help to make the world a better place, especially in the United States of America. His name was Martin Luther King Jr. I'm almost certain that you'll have heard his name before. He's a man who came up with a speech that began with the words, "I have a dream." He lived in the 1950s and 60s, when America was quite a different place to where it is now. Back in those days, not everybody got the same quality of life. Some people were told that they couldn't do things that others could. And Martin Luther King Jr. wanted everybody to be treated the same, especially by the police and the government. Well, the good news is that Martin Luther King Jr. did manage to get that to happen before he died. He did manage to see so many laws around the United States change so that things were fair for everyone. The sad news is that the way he died, well, he got shot. It was particularly sad since Martin Luther King Jr. had spent pretty much his whole life telling people that they really didn't need to hurt each other. In fact, Martin Luther King Jr. also said, even if they hurt you, even if people are being so mean that they are hitting you, you shouldn't hurt them back. The best way to help the world to be a more fair and kind place is to always be fair and kind, even if the world is being mean and horrible to you. But does that sound really possible? Do you really think that people can get a fair world without having to fight for it? Well, maybe we'll be able to find the answer in this brilliant little story that came to me from a young man who went to a school in Stevenage. I'd like to share it with you now. It goes like this. Now there was once a magical land called Reptopia, a land where all of the newts and the frogs and the toads and the lizards could all live happily together. And they did, most of the time. You see, order and law was kept by the Knights of the Round Lily Pad. These were frogs who went around with a thick black armour with spikes on the shoulders. And they carried with them some really long, heavy sticks that had big metal balls on the end. And out from those balls came some spikes. You may have seen weapons like that. We call them maces. And the Knights of the Round Lily Pad would go around looking for criminals. And if they saw one, they would go over and bop them on the head with that mace. And you might have thought that was actually a good thing. After all, if you don't have many criminals, then everyone else is going to be happy, right? But then, who actually is a criminal? You see, in Reptopia, only one group of people got to choose who the criminals were. And they were the Knights of the Round Lily Pad. At first, their idea of criminals was exactly the same as everybody else's. They thought, if you are stealing, you're a criminal. Boop, with the mace. Or if they saw somebody who was calling somebody else names, they would say, that's a criminal. And they would go over and boop, with the mace. But then the Knights of the Round Lily Pad thought to themselves, toads are a little bit bigger than frogs, and that means they sometimes eat more. Eating too much, that's a criminal. So they would go over and boop, them on the head. Then the Knights of the Round Lily Pad would say, if you have a really long tail, it can easily knock things over. Knocking things over with your tail. That makes you a criminal. Now, newts usually have quite long tails, and so do lizards. So, quite often, a newt or a lizard might accidentally knock something over with its tail. And if a Knight of the Round Lily Pad saw that, they would come over and boop, them on the head. Now, of course, this meant that the only creatures who weren't really getting bopped on the head were the frogs. And all of the Knights of the Round Lily Pad were frogs as well. In particular, the most famous knight of all, Sir Frog-a-Lot. Sir Frog-a-Lot was so famous because he had never been beaten in a fight. Any knight who tried to take him on, he would boop them on the head. And that's why the Knights of the Round Lily Pad had put Sir Frog-a-Lot in charge. And of course, because he was in charge, Sir Frog-a-Lot wanted to make sure that all of his friends were happy. But all of those who weren't Sir Frog-a-Lot's friends, well, he didn't care if they were happy. Did that sound very fair to you? Well, it certainly didn't sound fair to a young toad called Malcolm. Malcolm had lived in Reptopia for most of his life, and he had seen how the Knights of the Round Lily Pad treated everybody, and he thought it was about time they learnt their lesson. So when it came to the next feast day at Reptopia Castle, all of the knights were gathered around for their big party and a bit of duelling. Malcolm went along as well, poked up his head from among the crowds, stuck up his little toad hand and called out, "I challenge Sir Frog-a-Lot to a duel!" Well, all of the sound around him suddenly disappeared. The whole castle was quiet, except for one laugh. It was Sir Frog-a-Lot. He couldn't believe that there was this young toad up there in the audience issuing him a challenge. When he saw Malcolm calling him down, he thought, I will teach that little toad a lesson. Come down here, lad. Let's see if you really can beat me. Malcolm came down from the steps. He entered the arena, a big green playing field. And there at one end was Sir Frog-a-Lot, with his thick black armour with the spikes poking out of the shoulders. And, of course, his long, round, spiky mace. The thing is, young Malcolm didn't have his own weapon or his own armour, and because he was a young toad, well, there wasn't really any armour in the castle to fit him. And because he was so young, he found it really tricky to lift up the mace. But instead, he just put it down. And he said, I don't need any of that. I will fight you with my bare hands. Well, that just made Sir Frog-a-Lot laugh even more. He couldn't believe that this little toad could be so cheeky. There he was, a knight of the Round Lily Pad, with his thick black armour and all of those spikes on his shoulders, his big heavy mace that was round with spikes coming out, and this little toad thought that he could beat him still. Well, he deserved everything that was coming to him. Sir Frog-a-Lot sent everybody else out of the playground, and they went into the galleries all around the arena to look down really nervously, while Sir Frog-a-Lot raised up his heavy mace and charged towards Malcolm, going, "Rah!" How did he go? He went, "Rah!" Malcolm, though, he didn't have any armour on. He didn't have a heavy mace to carry. So he just ran away. He ran away all around the playground like this. How did he go? But Sir Frog-a-Lot was determined to catch that little toad, so he kept chasing after him. A little bit slower, he was getting tired with all of his heavy armour and his heavy mace, but he kept on going because he was determined to teach that toad a lesson. How did he go? But Malcolm didn't have any heavy armour. He didn't have any heavy mace, so he just kept running just as fast as he always had done. How did he go? Sir Frog-a-Lot was still determined to catch that little toad, so he kept on chasing after him, albeit a little bit slower. He was getting very tired now and quite sweaty with all of the heavy armour and the heavy mace, but he kept on going. How did he go? Remember it slower. But of course, Malcolm didn't have any heavy armour. He didn't have a heavy mace, so he could just keep going, still as fast as he had done from the beginning. How did he go? Sir Frog-a-Lot was determined to catch that little toad. But his armour was so heavy, his mace was so heavy, that now he was getting really, really hot, really, really exhausted, and so terribly sweaty. But he was determined, and he kept on going until he came to a stop, like this. And when he did come to a stop, he toppled over, just like a falling tree. Seeing that, Malcolm went over, pushed Sir Frog-a-Lot's mace so it rolled away, put his little toe leg on Sir Frog-a-Lot's head and said, "There! I win." At once the entire castle arena erupted with applause. Toads were clapping, newts were clapping, lizards were clapping, and even some frogs were clapping. Yeah, okay, Sir Frog-a-Lot was a frog as well, but quite a lot of the frogs knew that he could be a bit of a bully sometimes, and he was really arrogant. So they were happy to see someone had finally managed to teach Sir Frog-a-Lot a lesson. Sir Frog-a-Lot was very embarrassed, but he did learn his lesson. He actually made Malcolm a special advisor to the Knights of the Round Lily Pad. And from that day on, all of those silly laws about running too fast or knocking things with your tail, well, they got rid of those laws. So finally, Reptopia really could be a happy place for everyone. Now that was just a brilliant story created by a boy at a Stevenage primary school. But it's fairly similar, actually, to what Martin Luther King Jr. managed to do in the United States of America. Maybe now you've heard that story, the story of Malcolm, you can go out and find more about the story of Martin Luther King Jr. And perhaps you can chat with your grown-ups and your friends about what you might be able to do to help make your world a better and fairer place. Right now, though, it only remains for me to say cheerio, and I hope to hear your story soon. So, cheerio! And I hope to hear your story soon.